Hello, my name is Claire Gostomski. I'll be your next speaker today. Because of some health concerns, I will not be shaking your hands at the end of my speech, so I thank you for understanding. And if the judges just let me know whenever they're ready. Do you care about truth? I'm sure that most of us in this room would now be answering in our heads, of course I care about truth. But how often do our actions line up with that declaration? Our culture often confuses information with understanding, and understanding with wisdom. But what's the difference? There's a saying that goes, knowledge is knowing a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is not putting it in a fruit salad. Well, in the interests of science and investigative journalism, I decided to put this saying to the test to prove once and for all whether there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. So last Easter, I made myself a scrumptious-looking fruit salad with plenty of tomatoes, and I ate the whole thing. And I'm here to tell you, to verify, that that was the most disgusting thing I have ever eaten. Tomato and banana, not a good flavor. Tomato and orange is a whole lot worse. But what went wrong? Theoretically, I knew that a tomato was a fruit, and I put it in a dish with other fruits that should have tasted like a fruit salad. But knowledge alone is not enough to guide our actions. We need wisdom, which is the right application of knowledge, to act as a framework for our actions. In an era saturated with information, it is more vital than ever that we be vigilant in tuning our minds to the truth, so that we can avoid the pitfalls of ignorance, of arrogance, and of perpetuating untruths. We live in the information age. If you've ever felt overwhelmed by an influx of information, you have good reason. In 2011, Dr. Martin Hilbert and his team of scientists at the University of Southern California found that every day the average person is exposed to 5 times more information than people 20 years ago. 5 times. On the internet alone, we generate billions of terabytes of data daily. To put that in perspective, 1 kilobyte of data is like a printed page. 1 terabyte is like a big filing cabinet. By that analogy, we produce millions upon millions of warehouses of digital data every single day. The scale is staggering. And yet, this influx of information does not equal an increase in understanding. We have a broader breadth and a shallower depth. Surface level knowledge does not equal an in-depth understanding of a subject. In his book, Amusing Ourselves to Death, Neil Postman writes extensively on the subject of how the introduction of long-range communication devices, such as the telegraph, telephone, and eventually television, changed the way we think. And it changed to place an emphasis on entertainment over information, over finding and discovering facts. When this happens, we become arrogant in our pursuit of truth. And instead of pursuing truth, we take snatches of information, unverified, because they confirm our own emotional bent toward a subject. But ignorant is not the worst thing we could be. In Proverbs 26, verse 12, it says, "Do you see the man wise in his own eyes? There is more hope for a fool than for him." I would rather be ignorant than arrogant. But if I am ignorant in today's society, so often the arrogance comes along with it. In a world where the answers to my questions are just a few clicks away, where I have literally oceans of information at my fingertips, it is so easy to fall into the pitfall of being overconfident in my knowledge. The easiest way to combat this is simply to do the opposite. Instead of standing in the shallows, dive into the deep end. Study something deeply. You can choose any subject you like, something completely unfamiliar to you or something you've studied your whole life. For myself, it's the latter. I study history in order to keep myself humble. Because even though I've been studying it since I was a small child, Every time I open a new book or watch a new documentary, I discover something that surprises me. Entire worlds beyond my reach. Studying something deeply helps us to remain humble, which is crucial because as we become arrogant and overconfident in our knowledge, we often don't even realize it. And we pick up information and we spread it to the rest of the world, and thereby we perpetuate these falsehoods. We don't even realize it, but we've already become part of the problem. This hit me hard last month because that's what happened to me. You see, I compete in extemporaneous speaking, an event which requires me to stay relatively up to date with the news. And I'll admit, I have fallen into the trap of letting my tongue get ahead of my actual knowledge, thinking that a couple of Google searches on the electoral cycle qualifies me to teach a crash course in government. A post went viral at the beginning of March about presidential candidate Bernie Sanders. The post involved a picture of the candidate with text overlaid from a speech that he gave at the beginning of March, and the text said, quote unquote, "If you are white, you do not understand what it means to be poor." Obviously, this is an insultingly inaccurate overgeneralization. I immediately reposted it to Facebook and lumped it in with the rest of the things that candidate Bernie Sanders and I do not agree on. But a couple of weeks later, I stumbled across the full text of his speech. Bernie Sanders was quoting someone whom he was about to soundly refute because he disagreed with them just as much as I did. The post I read originally was incredibly misleading. The first thing I did was go on Facebook and, with a humility I didn't have when I reposted it, correct my misunderstanding. The second thing I did was determine to write a speech to tell other people about the lesson I had learned. When we fall into the pitfall of ignorance and of arrogance, of perpetuating untruths, we discredit ourselves and we make our reputation tarnished. You see, the goal of striving after biblical wisdom is not to tout our own depth of understanding. It is to become credible witnesses for Christ. How am I to have a meaningful conversation with someone who supports Bernie Sanders if I can't even accurately understand his own position? How am I supposed to claim that I stand for truth if I consistently misrepresent other people's arguments? In every area of our lives, we need to take stock of the things which we hold as truth. If you're not sure what those are, think of something that might come up in conversation, something you would be willing to take a definitive stance on. And once you've done that, apply two things. First, simply check your facts. It's easier than you might think. With all the resources available to us, I find websites like factcheck.org useful because they direct you to articles that are relevant and also from differing perspectives, which is necessary if you want to get the whole picture. But don't stop there. Check into your author's credentials. Make sure they're actually touting facts and not just spouting overgeneralizations. The second thing is just as important. Make sure that the conclusion you have drawn aligns with biblical wisdom. Because if the knowledge of the world doesn't line up with the wisdom of Scripture, then somewhere there's been a disconnect, and we must solve it. In a world saturated with information, where there are a lot of tomatoes and a lot of different kinds of fruit salad, we cannot rely on information alone to direct our actions. Join me in coming back to biblical wisdom so that you don't add tomatoes to your fruit salad. Thank you.